The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Windsor Castle, as Guard Captain James Morrison adjusted his red tunic for the final time. 23 years of military service had prepared him for many things, but nothing quite like this assignment. Today marked his first day as the personal guard to the royal family's youngest members, and the weight of responsibility felt heavier than the ceremonial sword at his side. James had earned this position through years of dedication and a spotless record. His colleagues often joked that he followed protocol so strictly, he probably saluted his morning coffee. But that precision had caught the attention of his superiors, and now he stood ready to protect some of the most important children in the world. The castle buzzed with its usual morning activity. Staff members hurried through corridors carrying fresh linens and breakfast trays. Gardeners tended to the immaculate flower beds that would soon be photographed by tourists from around the globe. Everything moved like clockwork, just as it had for centuries. Prince George, now 8 years old, had been described in James's briefing as an intelligent and curious child. The reports painted a picture of a boy who asked thoughtful questions and showed genuine interest in the people around him. His younger siblings, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, were equally beloved by the staff, each with their own distinct personalities that brought life to the ancient walls. James remembered his own childhood, growing up in a small village where everyone knew everyone. His father had been a local police officer, instilling in young James the importance of duty and service to others. Those early lessons had shaped his entire career, leading him through military training and eventually to this moment. The transition from battlefield to palace required a different kind of alertness. Instead of scanning for enemy threats, James now watched for photographers hiding in bushes, overzealous fans, and the countless small dangers that could threaten a child's safety. A loose stone on a pathway, an unlatched gate, or even an aggressive swan from the castle grounds could spell disaster in the wrong circumstances. His training had covered every possible scenario. Emergency evacuation procedures, medical protocols, communication systems, and most importantly, the delicate balance between protection and allowing the children to experience a normal childhood. The royal family wanted their children to grow up with as much normalcy as possible. Despite their extraordinary circumstances, the castle staff had welcomed James warmly. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, had taken him on a thorough tour, sharing stories about the family's daily routines. She spoke fondly of the children, describing Prince George's fascination with airplanes and his habit of asking detailed questions about how things worked. Charlotte's artistic talents and Louis's boundless energy kept everyone on their toes. James learned that the family preferred informal interactions with staff when away from public eyes. The children were encouraged to be polite but genuine, saying please and thank you while still being allowed to express their personalities freely. This approach created a warm atmosphere that felt more like a large family home than a formal institution. The security briefings had been extensive. James studied floor plans, escape routes, and communication protocols until he could navigate them blindfolded. He memorized the schedules of other guards, the routines of household staff, and the locations of every security camera and alarm system. The safety of the royal children depended on this attention to detail. Technology played a crucial role in modern royal protection. Hidden cameras monitored every public space, while advanced communication systems allowed instant contact with backup teams. James carried discreet devices that could summon help within seconds, though he hoped never to need them. Despite all the preparation, James felt the natural nervousness that came with any new position. The difference was that his new colleagues were among the most famous children in the world. Every decision he made would be scrutinized, every action analyzed. There was no room for error in this role. The morning briefing had covered the day's planned activities. The children would spend time in the private gardens, have lessons with their tutors, and enjoy lunch together in the family dining room. Simple activities that required complex security considerations to ensure their safety and privacy. James understood that his role extended beyond physical protection. He would become part of the children's daily lives, a familiar presence who needed to balance authority with approachability. The children should feel safe with him, not intimidated or restricted by his presence. The royal family's approach to parenting impressed James during his orientation. Despite their status, the parents emphasized the same values most families cherished: kindness, respect, curiosity, and compassion for others. They wanted their children to understand their privileged position while remaining grounded and connected to the real world. As James prepared for his first official interaction with the family, he reflected on the path that had brought him here. From a small village to Windsor Castle, from protecting soldiers to protecting princes, his journey had been remarkable. The skills remained the same: vigilance, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to those under his care. The castle bells chimed 9 o'clock, signaling the start of the Royal Children's Day. James took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and prepared to begin his most important assignment. He had no way of knowing that within hours, a simple gesture from Prince George would challenge everything he thought he knew about protocol, duty, and what it truly meant to serve the royal family. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as James prepared to meet his new charges. Little did he know that this day would test not just his training and protocols, but his ability to recognize that sometimes the most important signals come not from superiors or emergency systems, but from the innocent wisdom of a child who sees the world with clarity that adults often lose. The first meeting happened in the morning room, where sunlight streamed through tall windows onto comfortable furniture that looked more suited to a country home than a royal palace. James stood at attention as the children entered with their nanny, Miss Sarah, a kind woman in her 50s who had been with the family for several years. Prince George walked in first, his posture reflecting the early stages of royal training while still maintaining the natural movement of a child. He wore simple clothes, dark trousers, and a light blue sweater that any child might wear to school. Princess Charlotte followed, her bright smile immediately lighting up the room, while little Prince Louis bounded in with the enthusiasm typical of a 4-year-old. James had expected formal introductions, perhaps even a small ceremony marking the beginning of his service. Instead, Prince George approached him directly, extended his small hand, and said simply, "Hello, I'm George. Thank you for coming to help keep us safe." The sincerity in his voice caught James off guard, and he found himself genuinely moved by the child's maturity. Charlotte curtsied playfully, giggling at her own formality, while Louis hid behind his older brother's leg, peeking out with curious eyes. The scene felt remarkably normal, like meeting any family's children, yet James remained acutely aware of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this ordinary moment. Miss Sarah explained the children's daily routine while they listened politely. Morning lessons took place in the schoolroom, followed by outdoor time in the private gardens. Lunch was served in the family dining room, and afternoons were reserved for various activities depending on the weather and scheduled appointments. The routine provided structure while allowing flexibility for spontaneous learning opportunities. As they moved toward the schoolroom, James observed the children's interactions with the household staff. They greeted everyone warmly, from the gardener trimming hedges to the housemaid polishing brass fixtures. These weren't empty gestures taught by protocol instructors, but genuine expressions of interest in the people around them. The schoolroom impressed James with its combination of traditional and modern educational tools. Classical books lined wooden shelves alongside computers and interactive displays. Maps covered one wall, while another featured artwork created by the children themselves. The space felt alive with learning, curiosity, and creativity. During the morning lessons, James positioned himself near the door, close enough to respond to any situation while far enough away to avoid disrupting the educational process. He watched the children engage with their tutors, asking questions and participating in discussions that revealed their distinct personalities and interests. Prince George showed particular fascination with history lessons, especially those involving aircraft and space exploration. His questions demonstrated genuine curiosity rather than polite attention, and his tutors clearly enjoyed his engagement. Charlotte excelled in languages and art, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish while sketching detailed drawings of the castle gardens. The children's behavior impressed James throughout the morning. They listened respectfully to their tutors, helped each other when someone struggled with a concept, and maintained focus on their studies despite knowing they had a new guard observing them. Their parents had clearly succeeded in creating an environment where learning was valued and enjoyed. During a brief break between lessons, Prince George approached James with a question that revealed his thoughtful nature. "Captain Morrison, "Do you have children of your own?" The question was innocent, but it showed the child's interest in understanding the people around him as individuals, not just servants fulfilling roles. James answered honestly that he didn't have children, but that he had nieces and nephews he cared about deeply. This seemed to satisfy George's curiosity while opening a small window into the guard's personal life. The interaction felt natural and comfortable, suggesting that the working relationship might develop more easily than James had anticipated. The transition from schoolroom to garden provided James with his first real test of balancing security with childhood freedom. The private gardens offered numerous hiding spots, multiple entrance points, and countless potential hazards that could threaten the children's safety. Yet the space was designed for exploration and play, essential elements of healthy childhood development. James established clear but unobtrusive boundaries, positioning himself where he could maintain visual contact with all three children while they explored different areas of the garden. The children understood the need for these limits and respected them without complaint, suggesting they had grown accustomed to balancing freedom with necessary precautions. Princess Charlotte discovered a butterfly garden where dozens of colorful species fluttered among specially chosen flowers. Her excitement was infectious as she called her brothers over to share the discovery. Prince Louis was immediately fascinated, trying to catch the butterflies with his small hands, while George observed their behavior with scientific interest. The garden time revealed different aspects of each child's personality. George showed natural leadership, gently guiding his younger siblings away from potential dangers while encouraging their exploration. Charlotte demonstrated empathy, comforting Louis when he became frustrated at his inability to catch a butterfly. Louis displayed the fearless curiosity typical of young children, requiring gentle but firm guidance to prevent him from climbing too high or wandering too far. James found himself genuinely enjoying the children's company. Their conversations were refreshingly honest, their observations often surprisingly insightful, and their interactions with each other showed the strong family bond their parents had worked to create. These weren't spoiled royal children demanding constant attention, but well-mannered kids who happened to live in extraordinary circumstances. As the morning progressed, James began to understand why his predecessors had spoken so fondly of this assignment. Despite the enormous responsibility and constant vigilance required, protecting these children felt more like a privilege than a duty. Their genuine warmth and natural curiosity made the work personally rewarding in ways he hadn't expected. The approaching lunch hour would bring new challenges and observations, but James felt confident that he was beginning to understand his new role. The children had accepted his presence without fear or resentment. The household staff had welcomed him warmly, and the morning had passed without incident. Everything seemed to be proceeding exactly according to plan. Lunch in the family dining room revealed another layer of the royal children's upbringing. The room itself struck a balance between formality and comfort, with elegant furniture and fine china that didn't feel intimidating or overly precious. Fresh flowers adorned the table, and large windows provided natural light that made the space feel welcoming rather than ceremonial. The children entered the dining room with practiced ease, taking their assigned seats without prompting. Prince George helped Princess Charlotte with her chair, while Miss Sarah assisted Prince Louis. These small gestures of courtesy had clearly become second nature through consistent reinforcement rather than rigid drilling. James positioned himself near the entrance, where he could monitor both the children and any potential threats while remaining unobtrusive during their meal. The security briefing had emphasized the importance of maintaining normal family routines, allowing the children to experience typical childhood moments. Despite their extraordinary circumstances, the conversation during lunch fascinated James with its blend of ordinary childhood topics and the unique perspectives that came with their position. Prince George discussed a documentary about aviation he had watched the previous evening, asking thoughtful questions about how pilots navigated before modern technology. His interest went beyond casual curiosity, showing a genuine desire to understand complex concepts. Princess Charlotte shared her excitement about a letter from a pen pal in Canada, a girl her own age who lived on a farm and had sent photos of her horses. The connection between these two very different children highlighted the family's efforts to help their children understand life beyond palace walls. Charlotte's questions about farm life showed genuine interest in experiences vastly different from her own. Prince Louis contributed to the conversation with the delightful randomness typical of young children. He announced his intention to become a dinosaur expert and asked whether the castle had ever housed real dinosaurs. His older siblings patiently explained the timeline differences while encouraging his interest in prehistoric creatures. The meal itself consisted of simple, nutritious food that any family might serve. Sandwiches cut into manageable sizes, fresh fruit and vegetables prepared in appealing ways. The children ate without fuss, displaying good table manners while maintaining the relaxed atmosphere their parents had clearly worked to create. James observed the subtle ways the children looked out for each other during the meal. When Prince Louis struggled to cut his sandwich, Princess Charlotte quietly helped him without drawing attention to his difficulty. Prince George noticed when his sister dropped her napkin and retrieved it before she had to ask. These small acts of consideration spoke volumes about their upbringing. Miss Sarah facilitated the conversation with gentle questions that encouraged the children to think about their experiences and express their opinions. She asked Prince George about his favorite part of the morning's history lesson, prompted Princess Charlotte to describe her artwork, and helped Prince Louis explain his latest dinosaur facts. Her approach encouraged reflection and communication skills. The discussion turned to their afternoon plans, which included time in the art room for Princess Charlotte, a science experiment for Prince George, and outdoor play for Prince Louis. Each child had activities tailored to their interests and developmental needs, showing the careful thought put into their education and enrichment. James noted how the children discussed their plans with enthusiasm, but also consideration for others. Princess Charlotte invited her brothers to see her finished artwork. Prince George offered to show Louis his science experiment, and Louis promised to share his outdoor discoveries with his siblings. The spirit of inclusion and sharing permeated their interactions. As lunch concluded, a small incident provided insight into the children's character and their understanding of appropriate behavior. Prince Louis accidentally knocked over his water glass, creating a small puddle on the polished table. Instead of panicking or waiting for staff to clean it up, he immediately apologized and reached for his napkin to help. Prince George and Princess Charlotte instantly moved to assist their younger brother, not with criticism or teasing, but with matter-of-fact helpfulness. Miss Sarah praised Louis for taking responsibility and thanked all three children for working together to solve the problem. The incident was handled so naturally that it barely disrupted the meal's flow. The children's response to this minor mishap impressed James with its maturity and mutual support. In many families, such an incident might have led to scolding, tears, or blame. Here it became a learning opportunity about responsibility, problem-solving, and helping others. The parents had clearly succeeded in creating an environment where mistakes were treated as natural parts of learning, rather than failures to be punished. After lunch, the children thanked the kitchen staff who had prepared their meal, another example of the courtesy and appreciation their parents had instilled. These weren't empty formalities, but genuine expressions of gratitude that the children understood and meant. The kitchen staff clearly appreciated these acknowledgments, responding with warm smiles and genuine affection. The transition from lunch to afternoon activities provided James with another opportunity to observe the children's adaptability and consideration for others. They moved efficiently but without rushing, gathered their materials for planned activities, and confirmed their schedules with Miss Sarah. Their organization and responsibility exceeded what many adults achieved in similar situations. As they prepared to separate for individual activities, the children made plans to reunite later and share their experiences. Prince George reminded Princess Charlotte that he wanted to see her finished painting, while she asked him to save his science experiment to show her. Prince Louis received promises that his siblings would help him look for interesting leaves and insects during his outdoor time. James realized that his role extended beyond physical protection to supporting the environment their parents had created for healthy development. The children thrived in an atmosphere of mutual respect, intellectual curiosity, and emotional support. His presence needed to enhance rather than disrupt this carefully cultivated family dynamic. The afternoon promised new challenges and observations as the children pursued their individual interests. James felt increasingly confident in his ability to protect them, while respecting their need for age-appropriate independence and exploration. The morning and lunch had exceeded his expectations in terms of both the children's behavior and his own comfort with the role. As they moved toward their afternoon activities, James couldn't have predicted that the day's most significant moment was still ahead. Waiting in a quiet corridor where a simple gesture would challenge everything he thought he understood about duty, protocol, and the wisdom that sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. The afternoon separation allowed James to focus more intensively on individual protection, while the children pursued their distinct interests. Princess Charlotte headed to the art room with Miss Sarah. Prince Louis went to the gardens with another staff member, and Prince George made his way to the science room for his scheduled experiment session with his tutor. Dr. Williams. James accompanied Prince George through the castle's corridors, noting the child's familiarity with every painting, tapestry, and architectural detail they passed. George occasionally pointed out interesting features to James, acting as an informal tour guide with genuine enthusiasm for his home's history and significance. The science room impressed James with its child-friendly equipment and safety measures. Dr. Williams, a patient woman in her 40s with a gift for making complex concepts accessible to young minds, had prepared an experiment involving simple chemistry reactions that would demonstrate basic scientific principles while maintaining complete safety. Prince George approached the experiment with the methodical curiosity James had observed throughout the day. He asked thoughtful questions about the materials, listened carefully to Dr. Williams' explanations, and followed safety protocols without being asked. His genuine interest in understanding the underlying principles rather than simply watching flashy reactions showed intellectual maturity beyond his years. The experiment involved mixing safe household substances to create color changes and mild fizzing reactions. Dr. Williams explained each step while encouraging George to make predictions about what might happen. The young prince's hypotheses showed logical thinking and growing understanding of cause and effect, relationships. James positioned himself where he could observe both the experiment and monitor the room's entry points. The science room's numerous chemicals and equipment required extra vigilance, even though everything had been carefully chosen for its safety. His training had emphasized that everyday objects could become dangerous in the wrong circumstances. During a quiet moment while Dr. Williams prepared the next phase of the experiment, Prince George turned to James with an unexpected question. "Captain Morrison, do you think it's important to understand how things work even if you'll never need to know?" The question revealed the child's developing philosophy about learning and curiosity. James answered honestly that he believed understanding the world around us helped us make better decisions and appreciate the complexity of life. Prince George nodded thoughtfully, then added, "I think it helps us understand other people better too, doesn't it?" The insight impressed James with its emotional intelligence and empathy. The experiment concluded successfully, with Prince George carefully recording his observations in a notebook decorated with airplane stickers. Dr. Williams praised his careful attention to detail and encouraged him to think about how the principles they had demonstrated might apply to other situations he encountered. They prepared to leave the science room. Prince George insisted on properly cleaning and organizing the equipment they had used. His respect for materials and consideration for the next person who might use them reflected the values his parents had instilled. These weren't lessons learned through lectures but habits, developed through consistent example and gentle guidance. The walk back through the castle corridors provided an opportunity for Prince George to process what he had learned. He asked James thoughtful questions about his military experience, specifically about how scientific principles applied to aviation and navigation. The child's ability to connect abstract concepts to real-world applications impressed James with its sophistication. They encountered several staff members during their return journey, and James observed Prince George's interactions with each person. He greeted the housekeeping staff warmly, asked about the groundskeeper's new planting project, and thanked the security personnel for their service. These weren't forced pleasantries but genuine expressions of interest and appreciation. As they approached the main corridor where they planned to meet Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, James noticed something unusual. A member of the kitchen staff, Mrs. Patterson, sat on a bench in an alcove, her face showing clear distress. She held a handkerchief to her eyes and appeared to be crying quietly. trying to compose herself before returning to work. James faced a protocol dilemma. His training instructed him to maintain focus on his primary charges and avoid becoming involved in staff personal matters unless they posed a security threat. Mrs. Patterson's emotional state didn't appear to represent any danger to Prince George, and intervening might compromise his professional boundaries and responsibilities. Prince George had also noticed Mrs. Patterson's distress. James watched as the young prince's expression changed from casual observation to genuine concern. The child's natural empathy was clearly engaged, and James could almost see him processing the situation and considering appropriate responses. Protocol dictated that they should continue to their planned meeting point without deviation. James's training emphasized maintaining schedules and avoiding unnecessary interactions that might compromise security or create complications. The safe professional response was to guide Prince George past the alcove and pretend they hadn't noticed Mrs. Patterson's situation. But Prince George had stopped walking. He stood still in the corridor, his gaze fixed on the distressed woman with an expression that combined compassion with thoughtful consideration. James recognized the moment when a child's natural kindness conflicts with adult expectations about appropriate behavior. The young prince looked up at James, and in that moment, something passed between them that transcended their formal relationship. George's eyes held a question, a request for permission, and a quiet determination that spoke volumes about his character. He wasn't asking for entertainment or personal gain, but seeking approval to respond to another person's pain with kindness. James realized he was witnessing a defining moment in the child's moral development. Prince George's response to Mrs. Patterson's distress would shape his understanding of duty, compassion, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. The decision James made in the next few seconds would either support or undermine the values the royal family had worked so hard to instill. The corridor remained quiet except for Mrs. Patterson's soft crying and the distant sounds of castle life continuing around them. Prince George waited patiently for James's response, his body language indicating his desire to help while respecting the authority of his protector. The weight of the moment settled on James's shoulders as he realized that sometimes the most important protocol was the one written in the human heart. In that silent alcove, surrounded by centuries of royal history, a young prince and his guard faced a choice that would test everything they thought they knew about duty, service, and what it truly meant to serve others with honor and compassion. The moment stretched between James and Prince George as they stood in the corridor, the weight of decision heavy in the air around them. Mrs. Patterson continued to weep quietly, unaware that she had become the center of a silent moral conflict between protocol and compassion. James could feel the young prince's eyes on him, waiting for guidance in a situation that no training manual had ever covered. James thought about his years of military service, remembering the times when rigid adherence to orders had served him well, and other moments when flexibility and human judgment had made the difference between success and failure. The best officers he had known understood when to follow rules and when to recognize that the spirit of those rules sometimes required breaking them. Prince George made the decision for both of them. Without waiting for explicit permission, he approached Mrs. Patterson with the quiet dignity that seemed natural to him. His footsteps were soft but purposeful, and when he reached the alcove, he simply said, "Mrs. Patterson, are you all right?" The kitchen staff member looked up in surprise, quickly attempting to compose herself when she realized who had spoken. "Oh, Your Royal Highness, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just..." She struggled to find appropriate words while wiping her tears with the handkerchief. James felt his training war with his instincts as he watched the scene unfold. Every security protocol he had memorized told him to intervene, to redirect Prince George back to the planned schedule, to maintain professional boundaries. Yet something deeper, something that connected to his fundamental beliefs about service and humanity, told him to let this moment continue. Prince George sat down on the bench beside Mrs. Patterson, his small frame making the gesture both innocent and profound. "My grandmother always says that sometimes we need to cry to make room for better feelings," he said gently. "Would you like to talk about what's making you sad?" The simplicity and sincerity of the child's offer touched something in Mrs. Patterson that formal comfort never could have reached. Fresh tears appeared in her eyes, but these seemed different from the earlier ones, less desperate, more relieved. "It's my grandson, Your Highness. He's been having such a difficult time at school and I don't know how to help him." James realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Despite his young age, Prince George possessed an intuitive understanding of human pain and a natural ability to offer comfort. The child's response came not from training or protocol but from genuine compassion and emotional intelligence that exceeded his years. "What kind of difficult time?" Prince George asked, his voice carrying the same gentle curiosity he had shown during his science experiment. He wasn't prying or being nosy, but offering the kind of interested attention that encouraged people to share their burdens. Mrs. Patterson explained that her 10-year-old grandson had been struggling with reading difficulties that made him feel stupid and different from his classmates. The other children had begun teasing him, and he had become withdrawn and unhappy. She worried about his self-esteem and felt helpless to improve his situation. Prince George listened with the focused attention that James had observed throughout the day. When Mrs. Patterson finished speaking, the young prince was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking carefully about his response. Finally, he said, "I had trouble with some letters when I was younger, too. They would get mixed up and confused in my head." The admission surprised James, who hadn't been aware of any learning challenges in Prince George's background. The child continued, "My tutor taught me special ways to remember which direction letters face, and we practiced with games that made it fun instead of frustrating." "Would it help if I wrote down some of the games we used?" Mrs. Patterson's face brightened with hope and gratitude. "Oh, Your Royal Highness, that would be so kind of you. But I couldn't ask you to go to such trouble for my family." "It's not trouble," Prince George replied simply. "Helping people isn't trouble, it's what we're supposed to do." The statement carried the unconscious wisdom of a child who had been raised to understand that privilege came with responsibility, that advantages were meant to be shared rather than hoarded. James found himself deeply moved by the interaction. He had expected to spend his day protecting Prince George from potential threats, but instead he was watching the child offer protection and comfort to someone else. The young prince's instinctive response to another person's distress revealed character that no amount of formal training could instill. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Prince George asking thoughtful questions about Mrs. Patterson's grandson and offering suggestions based on his own experience. He spoke about different learning styles, the importance of patience with oneself, and the value of finding subjects that sparked genuine interest and enthusiasm. Mrs. Patterson gradually composed herself, her tears replaced by smiles as she listened to the young prince's encouraging words. She shared stories about her grandson's love of building things with his hands and his fascination with how machines worked. Prince George immediately connected these interests to potential learning strategies. Maybe he could learn to read by studying books about building and machines, Prince George suggested. "When we're interested in something, our brains work better at understanding. Dr. Williams taught me that during our science lessons." The practical wisdom in the child's suggestion impressed both Mrs. Patterson and James. Prince George had taken a complex educational concept and applied it to a real-world problem with empathy and intelligence. His ability to connect abstract ideas to concrete solutions showed remarkable cognitive and emotional development. As their conversation drew to a close, Prince George asked Mrs. Patterson to give his regards to her grandson and to let him know that many successful people had overcome similar challenges. He promised to write down the learning games and strategies that had helped him, offering to have them delivered through the proper household channels. Mrs. Patterson thanked Prince George with genuine emotion, her earlier distress replaced by hope and determination. She stood to return to her duties with renewed energy, pausing to curtsy and express her gratitude one more time before hurrying back toward the kitchen. James and Prince George continued their journey through the castle corridor, both quiet as they processed what had just occurred. The young prince had demonstrated leadership, compassion, and wisdom that many adults never achieved. More importantly, he had shown that true nobility came not from titles or protocol, but from the courage to respond to others' needs with kindness and generosity. The incident had taken less than 15 minutes, but James realized it would influence his understanding of his role for years to come. He had just witnessed the kind of character that made someone truly worthy of protection and service. As they walked toward their planned meeting point with Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, James struggled with the implications of what had just occurred. By allowing Prince George to deviate from the schedule and engage with Mrs. Patterson, He had technically violated multiple security protocols. Yet the interaction had revealed qualities in the young prince that validated every effort made to protect and nurture him. Prince George seemed to sense James's internal conflict. Without prompting, he said quietly, "Captain Morrison, I hope I didn't cause problems for you by stopping to talk with Mrs. Patterson. I know we have schedules to keep, but she seemed so sad." The child's consideration for James's position impressed him deeply. Despite being only 8 years old, Prince George understood that his actions had consequences for others, and felt responsibility for those outcomes. This awareness showed remarkable emotional maturity and social intelligence. James realized this was a teaching moment that could shape their working relationship and Prince George's understanding of leadership. His response needed to balance validation of the child's compassionate instincts with appropriate guidance about decision-making and communication. "Your Highness," James said carefully, "what you did for Mrs. Patterson was exactly what a good leader should do. You saw someone in need and offered help. But in the future, a quick signal to me beforehand would help me do my job better while still allowing you to help others." Prince George nodded thoughtfully, clearly processing this feedback. "Like a team working together?" he asked. "You need to know what I'm thinking so you can keep everyone safe while I try to help." "Exactly like a team," James confirmed, impressed by the child's quick understanding of the collaborative nature of their relationship. This wasn't about rigid authority and blind obedience, but about partners working together toward common goals of safety and service. They reached the main hallway where Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis waited with their respective caregivers. Charlotte had paint smudges on her fingers and a proud smile that suggested her artistic session had gone well. Louis bounced excitedly, clearly eager to share whatever discoveries he had made in the gardens. "George," Princess Charlotte called out when she saw her older brother, "wait until you see what I painted. It's the butterfly garden and I got all the colors just right." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and James watched Prince George's face light up with genuine interest in his sister's achievement. Prince Louis ran to his older brother with his hands carefully cupped, announcing that he had found the most beautiful leaf in the whole world and had been saving it to show them. His excitement over this simple treasure reminded James of the wonder that childhood could bring to ordinary discoveries. The reunion of the three children created a warm family scene that made James's protective instincts feel more personal than professional. These weren't just his assigned charges, but remarkable young people who brought out the best in each other and the people around them. Their genuine affection and interest in each other's activities spoke volumes about their upbringing. As they prepared to move to their next scheduled activity, James found himself thinking about the signal Prince George had mentioned. The child had intuitively understood that effective teamwork required communication and mutual awareness. This insight suggested possibilities for developing their working relationship beyond the traditional guard subject dynamic. Princess Charlotte noticed that something had changed in the dynamic between her brother and James. With the perceptiveness common to intelligent children, she asked, "Did something interesting happen during science time?" Her question was casual but observant, showing her awareness of subtle social cues. Prince George exchanged a quick glance with James before answering his sister. "We learned about chemical reactions, and Captain Morrison and I figured out how to work better as a team." The response was truthful while maintaining appropriate discretion about the incident with Mrs. Patterson. The afternoon's remaining activities proceeded smoothly, with James finding his role increasingly comfortable and natural. The children moved through their schedules with easy cooperation, their interactions with staff remaining warm and respectful. The incident in the corridor had somehow strengthened rather than complicated his working relationship with Prince George. During their final outdoor activity of the day, James observed the children's natural leadership qualities emerge in different ways. Prince George organized a gentle game that included all three siblings despite their different ages and abilities. Princess Charlotte contributed creative ideas that made the activity more engaging for everyone. Prince Louis brought infectious enthusiasm that kept the energy positive and fun. The game they invented involved finding specific types of leaves and flowers to create a nature collection that told a story. Each child took turns adding elements to the collection, while explaining how their contribution fit into the evolving narrative. The activity combined education, creativity, and physical activity in a way that engaged all their interests. James positioned himself where he could maintain security, while allowing the children maximum freedom to explore and play. The private gardens provided a safe environment for this kind of unstructured activity, and watching the children's natural curiosity and cooperation reinforced his growing appreciation for their characters. As the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across the castle grounds, the children gradually wound down their outdoor activities. They carefully collected their nature specimens to share with their parents later, showing the same consideration for others' interests that James had observed throughout the day. The walk back to the castle provided time for reflection on the day's events. James realized that his understanding of royal protection had evolved significantly in just a few hours. The role required not just physical security and protocol enforcement, but also supporting the development of character traits that would serve these children throughout their lives. Prince George's intervention with Mrs. Patterson had demonstrated that the royal family's emphasis on service and compassion was taking root in practical ways. The child's instinctive response to another person's distress showed that the values being taught were becoming internalized rather than merely performed for public approval. As they entered the castle for the day's final activities, James felt confident that he had found the right balance between security and support for the children's natural development. The afternoon had proven that flexibility and human judgment could enhance rather than compromise his protective duties. The evening routine would bring new observations and challenges, but James approached these with increased confidence in his ability to serve both the children's safety and their growth into the kind of leaders the world needed. The day had exceeded his expectations in every way, suggesting that this assignment would be both professionally rewarding and personally meaningful. The incident with Mrs. Patterson had become a turning point that defined not just his relationship with Prince George, but his understanding of what true service meant. Sometimes the most important protocol was the one written in compassion, rather than regulation books. As they prepared for the transition to evening activities, James carried with him the knowledge that he was protecting children who were already learning to protect and serve others. The responsibility felt both heavier and more honorable than any he had previously undertaken. The evening brought a quieter pace to the castle, as the children transitioned from active learning and play to more reflective activities. James accompanied them to the family library, a magnificent room lined with books from floor to ceiling, where comfortable reading chairs and warm lighting created an atmosphere perfect for winding down from the day's adventures. Prince George had kept his promise to Mrs. Patterson, spending part of the early evening writing out the learning games and strategies that had helped him overcome his own reading challenges. James watched as the young prince carefully crafted his notes, explaining each technique clearly and adding encouraging words about the importance of patience and practice. The care Prince George took with this task impressed James with its thoroughness and empathy. The child drew simple diagrams to illustrate letter recognition games, wrote out step-by-step instructions for building reading confidence, and included a personal note expressing his belief that Mrs. Patterson's grandson would succeed with time and support. Princess Charlotte had brought her finished painting to share with her family, proudly displaying the detailed butterfly garden scene she had created during the afternoon art session. Her attention to color and detail showed genuine artistic talent, but more importantly, her joy in sharing her work revealed the confidence and enthusiasm their parents had nurtured. Prince Louis contributed to the evening's calm atmosphere by settling in with a picture book about dinosaurs, occasionally sharing fascinating facts he had discovered with anyone willing to listen. His boundless curiosity remained evident even in quieter moments, and his siblings patiently engaged with his interests while pursuing their own activities. As the family gathered for their evening meal, James observed the day's experiences come together in their conversations. The children shared their learning adventures, discussed their discoveries, and made plans for future explorations. The atmosphere combined the warmth of any loving family with the unique perspectives that came from their extraordinary circumstances. Prince George's parents arrived for dinner, and James watched as the children enthusiastically recounted their day's activities. When Prince George mentioned his conversation with Mrs. Patterson, his parents listened with the kind of focused attention that encouraged honest communication and value-based decision-making. The parents' response to their son's compassionate intervention revealed the source of the children's remarkable character. Instead of criticism for deviating from schedules or concern about protocol violations, they praised Prince George's kindness while gently discussing the importance of communication and safety considerations. "George," his father said thoughtfully, "your kindness toward Mrs. Patterson shows exactly the kind of leader you're meant to become. Captain Morrison, how do you feel about the way George handled this situation?" James felt the weight of the moment as 3 generations of the royal family awaited his assessment. His answer would influence not just Prince George's understanding of the incident, but potentially shape the family's approach to similar situations in the future. "Your Royal Highness demonstrated exceptional compassion and wisdom," James replied honestly. He recognized genuine need and responded appropriately, showing exactly the kind of character that makes someone worthy of service and protection. Our brief discussion afterward about communication will help us work even better as a team in the future. Prince George's parents exchanged a meaningful glance, clearly pleased with both their son's actions and James's supportive response. The conversation continued with gentle guidance about balancing spontaneous kindness with necessary security considerations, always framing the discussion in terms of expanding capabilities rather than imposing limitations. The evening meal concluded with the children's traditional sharing of gratitude for the day's experiences and the people who had contributed to their learning and growth. Each child mentioned specific staff members, learning opportunities, and moments of connection that had made the day special. As the children prepared for their evening routines, Prince George approached James with a small folded paper. "Captain Morrison, this is for Mrs. Patterson's grandson. Could you make sure he gets it through the proper channels?" James accepted the carefully prepared notes and personal message, recognizing the document as evidence of character development that exceeded any formal education. The young prince had translated his own learning experiences into practical help for another child, demonstrating empathy, leadership, and service in action. The bedtime routine proceeded with the calm efficiency that spoke to well-established family traditions. James maintained his protective presence while respecting the private family moments that were essential for the children's emotional security and development. As the children settled into sleep, James reflected on a day that had challenged and changed his understanding of royal service. He had begun the morning expecting to protect 3 privileged children from external threats. Instead, he had discovered young people who were already learning to protect and serve others through their compassion and developing wisdom. The silent signal Prince George had given him in that castle corridor had communicated more than any formal briefing could have conveyed. It had revealed a child's natural understanding that true leadership meant recognizing and responding to others' needs, even when it required courage to act against conventional expectations. James realized that his role extended far beyond physical protection to supporting the development of character traits that would serve these children throughout their lives as leaders and human beings. The day had proven that the most important protocol was often the one written in the human heart, rather than official regulations. As he prepared his daily report, James understood that he would need to document not just security measures and schedule adherence, but the character development and moral growth he had witnessed. The royal family's investment in raising compassionate, service-oriented leaders was clearly succeeding. The first day of his new assignment had ended with James feeling more honored and motivated than any previous role had provided. He was protecting children who were already learning to protect others, serving young people who understood that privilege came with responsibility for service. Prince George's silent signal had indeed forced him to break protocol, but in doing so, it had revealed the higher protocol of human compassion that made all other rules meaningful. The experience would guide his service for years to come, reminding him that sometimes the most important signals come not from official channels, but from the quiet wisdom of those we are called to serve.